This is the mini bike. This video is mostly for my family, but I'm sure most people will see it. So I built this a few years ago. I bought the frame, bought the engine. It's actually designed for an 80cc 2 horsepower engine, but due to the CVT, it will not fit on this frame without stretching it. So this frame was stretched about 6 inches. I cut it there, and I added in solid tubing on all sections. So that's about 6 inches of stretch that this would have had, that's added to it. The engine itself is entirely stock, aside from the air filter. One jet, there's a jet that's upjetted a little bit, and it removed the governor. So this will rev until it explodes. There is really no rev limiter on it. The rev limiter is basically the gearing. Now, the original gas tank was removed due to the placement. It just wasn't fit in the frame, and that was a better fuel tank, but it wouldn't fit. The throttle is this. It's a little bit terrifying unless you are used to driving a motorcycle, and even then it's not great because the grip on this is only got that much go. It doesn't actually have a whole lot to turn, so it's incredibly touchy to drive this thing, and it will haul ass quickly. The fuel tank I did end up getting cost me a lot of money and was fantastic. It came with holes, and the cap on here has a vent. Initially, it would have been just a nipple, but no fuel line would stay on it because it was so short. So I ended up using a screw from a snapper gas cap that has the center is hollowed out, and there's 2 vents on each side of the threaded. So it basically vents through this. It's like a banjo bolt for a vent cap. It's pretty decent, but I had to JB weld a lot of these welds that were terrible on the back of the tank and the other side and such. This drag is because occasionally, if I overfill it and I give it gas, it used to spit fuel right up in my face, and because of that, it's just easier to have a rag. Plus, it's always a place to wipe my hands. This bungee cord is only there to hold this on. The actual mounting brackets on this is actually Delrin that was cut to fit on the frame, fit the tank, and then big ass straps. I cannot think. A hose clamp. There you go. That's the one. But stretching the frame was interesting. It does tend to drive, honestly, it's pretty terrible. The turning is basically just leaning because it is such a long frame with such a short turn. That's Luna, who I am getting her used to the garage. She needs to be exposed to the garage. She's, for whatever reason, scared of the garage. Not a big fan, so I'm trying to use exposure to maybe get her to be a little more okay with the garage. I don't know if it'll work. But the steering on this thing is, well, it's kind of crap. But if I'm driving and I lean, it does actually most of the steering, and that's all it really does. This frame came with a kill switch up here, which works. It wires into the original kill switch down here. I did remove the oil sensor too because this engine doesn't stay completely level and it leans. And I did not want, when it leans or tilts or anything or up a hill, this engine to turn off because the sensor was stripped. And quite honestly, I can check the oil. So I killed that, I removed that, and then it has a kill switch here and a kill switch here. It runs pretty good. It still has the original carb, so you have a fuel shutoff with that lever, and then you have your choke. It runs decent. This will do 55 This is the really janky design of a crankcase vent that I could come up with, because everything they give is like this filter, which is a 1/4 inch nipple, and that's like a 3/8 nipple, and yeah. So this is the best I could come up with that's kind of airtight in the aspect that it won't suck in chunks of crap into the engine. Hopefully you shouldn't get any suction on this, but I didn't want to find out that I now have crap in my engine. So this is just a Predator 212 from Harbor Freight. When I potted it was like $120, $130. Now I'm sure it's way more, because I bought this stuff around 2021, 2020. The exhaust, this is the second design of my exhaust. The original one was really pretty awesome because it had an actual spark arrestor on the end. It looked kind of sweet, but it's heavy. It is so heavy that it needs some kind of strap to hold it. I used a hose clamp, but it doesn't work. This is an idea that so far has worked pretty well. I put 50 miles on this exhaust, and it seems to hold up. This header pipe was not sold. I had to pretty much produce it. They make a similar in the bend to this, but it's wrong because this engine is actually on a wedge. If you look down here, the engine's on a wedge, so the angle it had did not work well with this engine option. I had to do the angle so the engine would fit in there a little bit better, and I could fit the CVT in. And that also has a side-to-side movement to align with my rear sprocket, which is a sprocket that is it is basically a plate bolted to the hub, and then you screw your sprockets on. It's kind of reversed because it's the only way it fits on this frame. It's for a go-kart, but it does fit this. Now that oil is pretty normal. It actually isn't leaking oil. The problem I had, and I have to fix it, it's a future problem, is this engine comes with 2 dipsticks. And that one, you can kind of see the orange, leaks. It backs off and leaks. I need to basically JB weld that one in, because the other one is in front of the engine by the oil drain. The oil drain being right there. Then there's that dipstick. Way easier to get to. These engines always come with 2, and it doesn't really need 2. So that is an issue. Basically, it weeps oil. It's always oily, but it's gotten worse. I need to fix that. The brake situation is absolutely hilarious because it goes so damn fast. Thankfully, this one engine brakes, but that brake pad is very tiny. It is about 1 inch by 1.5 inch and 6 millimeters thick. This piece is about the diameter of a 1/4. That's the piston. It's about the size of a 1/4. It's very small. I mean, the rotor itself next to it is right there. So you can see it doesn't have that much surface. And dog, I see you. Yes. You are fine. I promise you. So the brakes are hydraulic. The original ones were cabled. They did not last. They lasted me 3 miles and were done. Brake pads are cheap, but the hydraulic hose, because this is a stretch frame, the hose was built for the old frame, the original. So I had to get this hose made locally. And this is not 10 millimeter banjo bolt motorcycle hardware. This is 8 millimeter banjo bolt hardware that is really only for mini bikes and Chinese 4-wheelers and tiny Chinese things. So this had to be locally sourced. Thankfully, there's a hydraulic line shop that pretty much builds any line you have and require, and they could charge me $80 for one. So I ran it the best I could along the inside of the frame, around the front. Because of this brake being so small, the master cylinder and everything is also comically tiny. Here's the brake. It doesn't really engage the brake till about here, and then it actually starts pushing on the caliper. The actual the way this is honestly kind of terrible if you've ever used motorcycle hardware. because this thing is comically tiny. Well, I mean, it's no wider than my finger, and it's itty bitty. But yeah, no, this is not a great system. I usually have to use all the brake when I need to use it. There is no extra, and it works okay, good enough for now. I would like to eventually look into putting a front brake as an option, but I'm gonna probably have to build forks if I go that route. And this one works. Brake pads are cheap. They're about, I think, $2.50 a set. I bought like $10 got me like 4 sets. So yeah, they're like $2.50 a set. They're not bad. The problem that this frame has is, since it was built for a chain drive only torque centrifugal clutch and not a torque converter that this has, the foot pegs are kind of short. And my foot really can only use half of this foot peg. So I added a chunk of, basically it's a bolt that's been screwed into the end. And it works okay. I would like to actually rebuild that foot peg, but I'm not exactly, I see you, dog. I see you. I'm not exactly super motivated because this works for now, and I haven't had any issues with it. It would look better had it not have a bolt sticking out of the foot peg. But it would also look better if I didn't have a t-shirt on the gas tank and it didn't mark its territory wherever I go. So it, in general, could look better. Plus, this was purely practical that I made this out of scrap pieces. These two were from school, and then these two I got off of the welding cart that I built over there. That was an old food dog cart from a Dollar General down in Florida. I made this in like an hour. I just welded this up quickly to mount gasoline to, because my tank only has about 25 minutes of wide open, maybe 20-25 minutes. It's very tiny. That has about 32 ounces of fuel in it. It's very, very small. This doesn't get terrible mileage if you're actually, I can drive it 55 miles an hour. I would assume going through 4 tanks of fuel is about an hour, is 1 gallon. So you can get about 80 something. 22 miles, I think, is how much I can go before it runs out. So 22 times 4 is 44, 48. Like, it's up in the 80s and 90s. I'm not even going to do the math. I'm kind of lazy. But it's really not that hard. This is actually pretty decent on mileage. It doesn't burn up that much fuel. It's even nicer if you're not wide open really killing it. It really does putt around nicely. But I ground off the extra overdrive on the current stock clutch on the primary. So it doesn't go 55 currently. It only goes about 50. 45, 50, because I ruined that. I need to get a new one. Currently, I think it has an engagement point on that clutch of about 3,400 to 3,700. The new weights I want to buy will give it an engagement of about 4,000 RPM, which is ridiculous. This thing, when you give it gas, it is at 30 miles an hour within a couple seconds. It is so immediate. It is impressive how quickly it goes, and it's hard to describe how hard this thing takes off. It's actually hard to keep the front wheel down because it is so light. That engine in current formation is probably about 40 pounds of weight, and this frame is probably about 40 pounds. So this thing is just at about 100 pounds of weight, in the fact that it goes the speeds it does, and it has the power that it has. That engine was stock 6.5 horse at 3,600 RPM. Because this is capable of higher, if it revs to 5,000 RPM, doing the math, technically it would have 8 horsepower. I don't know if it actually makes that, because I don't know if I ever get to 5,000 RPM, but still 6.5 is pretty good, and even if it got close to 7 when I really get going, it pulls really hard, and it actually pulls hills really well. It reminds me a lot of my old Yamaha 125 Zuma that would do 64 miles an hour and could do 45 easy. It reminds me a lot of the way performance that thing had. It was kind of wicked. But the only downsides are these tires are not rated for the speeds this thing hauls ass at. This thing really, this one looks fine. But if you go to the back of the tire, come on, dog, move it or lose it. I'm rolling here. The back tire, oh, that's fantastic. I love that. Okay. Well, you can kind of see it. It has flat spots on the side. These were kind of square tires, and because of having to lean to turn, they kind of round it off, and they don't really inspire confidence. Plus, this is the tire that takes all the abuse because it takes off, and it stops. So this thing burns up tires. This one has... It probably has about 150 miles at this point. Last Saturday, I drove it 50 miles. Took me a couple hours. Took a pretty leisurely drive to DeSoto and back, and this, it's funny, I've drove by a couple cops, and nobody has said anything. They just ignore me. I'm going to keep driving it until somebody gives me a hard time, but I just don't think it's going to happen. They just don't seem to care. As long as I'm wearing a helmet, wearing my motorcycle gear, and driving like the law would state you need to drive, they just don't seem to be bothered at all. They just don't care. Maybe they think it's too much paperwork, I guess. I don't know. But this is the mini bike. I don't know if I've told some of my family about it even. It was put on hold for about 18 months, and I was kind of looking at it, and either it needed to get fixed or sold, and I wanted to see how fast it would go. And then when I get to 55, and my Zuma has been broken down quite a bit recently, I blew the engine up on it, and now it is currently waiting on a secondary clutch set of bearings and some other parts. It's been broke quite a bit. So because of that, I have been driving this to and from my aunt's house for the later part of the year when I was doing yard work. Now I'm not really doing that anymore, but this was nice to buzz around town on and do small stuff. But I would have usually used this one for. But it doesn't run currently. I have a video of that driving with the new exhaust on my channel, but it is pretty wild that it can push my weight, which is 265 pounds at 55 miles an hour, and it does stop reasonably quick. I mean, those brakes are smoking, but they do stop. And I drove it 50 miles last weekend, and it seems to be fine. It hasn't had any issues. The biggest issues I've always had with this bike, and always will, because the chain tensioner is garbage, is the chain tensioner. The chain tensioner consists of that plate there and a roller. That plate, the plate and roller design is perfect for a small 35 size chain. This is a 420 chain because the 35 just does not handle the power well. 35 size chain, if I used it, will be stretched in probably 3 tries. 3 good drives and it's done, and I don't want to deal with that anymore. So because of the bigger links, that had to actually replace. I had to add an inch to it. The original one was only about half that length. I welded it on, and because I have been building this bike one problem at a time, I have never worried about a paint job. You can see those grind there that I had for the ground when I welded this, and none of this has been painted. It's stored indoors. I don't really drive in the rain, so it's been fine. And honestly, right now, it's covered in so much grease and oil, it's not going to rust. But it is something I got to do in the future. I have to actually repaint some of the areas when I get it close to done. But I wouldn't ever say this is done. Every time I get close to done, it has something else that breaks on it. It's kind of a fun project, but it can be very infuriating. When I bought it, I really would love to put lights on it. But I found out when I bought this engine that that is a California model engine, which means it's a Hemi. And the Hemi engine has the square valve cover, does not have a capable charging flywheel. The non-Hemi, if everywhere else, has a kind of a diagonal, weird-shaped valve cover. It's not really a square. Those you can get a flywheel for, and you can charge. They have a 350-watt charging capability. If this engine blows up, I plan to buy one with a charging wheel a charging rotor, so I can drive this thing and charge a battery, which conveniently, because of this frame design, I could mount right there once I fix the oil issue. And I could actually hook up headlights and taillights and blinkers, something I would love to do because blinkers are not going to be hard to mount on those bars. Back here they might get a little interesting, but now 350 watts isn't a whole lot for a charging system, and more than likely I'm going to have to pretty much put a pigtail to charge it before I leave, and then leave with a full battery, let it charge, run LED lights, and just hope for the best of it. I'm probably, be honest, I'll probably just turn the headlight off during the day and only use it at night to conserve some power, because yes, this thing is not going to charge that battery. It'll have to be a large battery, and it will not charge. It probably will lose power as I'm driving. So that will be interesting. Either I'm going to have to go with a massive battery or just... And I can't go with anything bigger charging-wise. That's pretty much the limit. So it's an issue that I haven't really... I would love to do that because it would be a fun challenge to build a wiring harness for it. And I may do that. But I'm kind of waiting for this engine to die. That's hard to do because these engines are quite reliable. Even though they're Harbor Freight, they're pretty well made. They just kind of overbuild them, honestly. But this is the mini bike. I have purposely made sure I don't know how much this cost me to build because it's way too much. It's way too much. I don't know. It's not really for that reason. It is only for something to do and something to think about because it is a fun challenge trying to come up with new designs. This is pretty damn quiet too. This exhaust system on this bike, it runs good, and this thing quiets it down to about pressure washer noise out of a standard engine with an exhaust. This thing is very quiet. When I drive this thing down the road, it honestly sounds like a pressure washer is driving down the road because it's so quiet and tame. And I love that because the cops will not get noise complaints, so they won't bother me. And the people won't be hearing it because they'll think somebody's mowing their yard or pressure washing, and they just kind of ignore it. Unlike straight pipes where they become loud. I have drove this thing with a straight pipe once, and that was because the old muffler actually fell off the whole exhaust, and that was ungodly loud. It annoyed me in about 2 miles, so I had to fix that quickly because I was not driving it with a loud ass exhaust. But otherwise, I can't really think of anything else I did to build it. I did not cut this fender. It was like that. Pretty much the frame was a roller. It just came with a seat, fenders, a brake, the throttle, the kill ignition, and that was it. And for example, the reason I specifically kept with this carburetor is that the reason I went with this carburetor versus any other carburetor is really the fuel shutoff. It is so practical to have that, and quite honestly, this engine with stock everything and really not killing the RPMs, you're not really going to find any performance decrease in keeping this carburetor on it. It's actually not that bad. People, oh, that's loose. Awesome. Fantastic. Another thing I got to tighten. But there's really no performance lost on it. It's actually really runs really good. It's smooth. I hear you, Luna. And you don't need to put a fancy Mikuni carburetor on it that makes it bigger because you can only burn up so much gas. My friend did that on his, and honestly, his ran more inefficient and ran crappy. His had more issues than mine ever did. Mine is simple. You choke it, you pull it, it kind of runs, you warm it up, you get rid of choke, you give it gas, it goes. You know, it runs so consistent. The only time it doesn't run consistent because of this airbox is when it's cold. Well, not even an airbox, it's a pod. These are terrible, but there was no better option. In the original design, I really wanted this to be snaked up under the seat. So I'd get some warm air for the winter to help it out, but also so that way is not sticking out so bad. It's really not that bad because I sit about here and then my leg goes down and touches this, so I don't really notice this. This doesn't get in my way. And I rotated this so I can get to the handle while I'm riding it, or I'm sitting on it. Because when you have it normally, the handle's in front. But yeah, I wanted something else, but the problem is I really couldn't. I could have found a hose to fit this, but I was thinking about it, and there's going to be such a nasty corner on this hose that I don't know how that would actually run. So I didn't do anything with it. Yeah, it's been 25 minutes. I should probably be done. This is Luna, the dog who is so scared of the garage. Yes, it's so scary. Dog is scared of everything. She's our newest member of the family. We got her about July, August. We got Luna.